Hi guys, and welcome to my April wrap-up. I read 14 books in April. It's a bit insane, it's a bit crazy, but like 3 of them I read on the first day of April, so yeah, there's that. I'm gonna try and get through these really fast. I'm not gonna give super in-depth reviews. I have all separate reviews on all of these, which I'll go ahead and link down below, or they might be coming out soon because I'm a little behind on putting up my reviews, but I'll go ahead and link them. Eventually they'll all be linked. I read some really good books, some ones that were really hard to get through, but they were all, I think I read a lot of really good books this month. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's go back in time to the beginning of this month. I read 3 books from a series, and I had originally read this one, Rescue Me, back in January. Didn't really like it, but I got into a lot of other Rachel Gibson books because they're easy to read. They're fast romances. I typically like her style. There's some nitpicky things I could say about them, but I went back and started off this one, and I know it's like a decade or 15 years earlier than this one, so it was gonna throw me off a little bit, but I had read other series all the way through and they made more sense. It was more enjoyable. I knew all the characters that were going on, even though you don't have to. You can definitely read these out of order. So I went back in time and I read Daisies Back in Town by Rachel Gibson, and this was my favorite out of the series. Let's just get that off the bat. Daisies Back in Town is a little more longer story, like this one is a little more elaborative, and basically the central is Daisy comes back to town and there's a man there that doesn't want her there, and he was in love with her, passionately in love, but he also had a best friend, and his best friend didn't him and his best friend made a pact never to date Daisy. They were like this threesome growing up. They were best friends forever, but the boy started having feelings for him, made a pact. His friend Jackson started dating her, fall in love with her, and then all of a sudden his whole world gets flipped upside down. His parents die in a car crash, and then Steven shows up on his front porch with Daisy and says, "We're getting married and we're leaving town." And that's exactly what happened in his life. So that's where the story starts. As she's coming back into town, Steven has died from cancer, and she had been married to him for a decade or 15 years, and she comes back to town with their son, Nathan. And that's where the whole dilemma starts, is Nathan, the whole time, Nathan is his son, and that was kind of one of the reasons she ran away from him, because he was unpredictable, wouldn't create a stable life, and she loved both of these boys a lot, but one of them a little more physically, I would say, definitely. And so it's a will they, won't they? Will he forgive her? There's a lot of hurt feelings. There's a lot of pain to get through. She does work through it pretty well in the book, and this was definitely my favorite of the series. The next 2 that I read after that were both novellas that were in the series of the Love It, Texas series. So the second one was Crazy on You by Rachel Gibson, and this one was about Daisy's sister Lily, and Lily did some crazy stunts in Daisy's Back in Town, but it has been like a decade, I think, since that book. That's where this book starts off, and that's where kind of like these books start out. It's about all a decade after Daisy and Jackson's story. So then Lily has settled down a little bit, and she hates being called crazy. She went a little bit crazy after her husband was cheating on her and going through divorce, and she drove a car into a living room at one point. So, and then she did some other crazy stuff as a teen. So she wants to get away from that. She owns her own shop, and it's about an hour away. She drives back and forth because she loves living in Love It, Texas, and she loves what she does, and she found her real passion in life. She is raising her son from her first marriage, and in walks a man named Tucker, and he's the new policeman, and he pulls her over, and it's a really short book, and it's a really short romance, but they both have pasts that they want to hide from the other because they simply just don't want to. He doesn't want to delve into. He is a veteran, and hers she just finds embarrassing and doesn't think it's part of her anymore. So that's where the stories are, and that's where they lie, and I thought they were really good. But it's a short novel. Honestly, you could read Daisies Back in Town and be done with that series, because this one was the next one. I just thought the character was shallow. I didn't connect with them. And then the last one was I Do. And so I Do is even later. It's about 5 years later than all those books, and it is about Nathan, the son, who was 15 in Daisies Back in Town, or maybe it's not later. And now he's 25, okay? So Nathan is probably about 25 in this book. And he's went off to college, dated a lot of girls, and the people in this book are getting married. Sadie Halliwell's getting married. And it brings back all the characters, so you get to hear about all the characters. That's the good part about the novella, is you get to hear about all the characters, but it's really short. It's 75 pages. The love is instant love, and it, who Nathan falls in love with, and it's cute and fine, but for me, I didn't need to read it as well. So I tried to go through those fast, sorry, but that was hard to do. The next book I read, next like full-length actual book I read, was The Crown's Fate by Evelyn Skye. I listened to this on audiobook. I do not like the people who they chose to do audiobook on either The Crown's Fate or The Crown's Game, but that's neither here nor there. I thought they were both cute, easy to read YA stories about magic, and they were a little bit like The Night Circus, but they were easier and faster to read, and they're YA, and I didn't see any problem that they were a little bit like it. And the second one was pretty good, but I think I liked the first one a little bit better. One had a little bit more faults in it, I think. The overall story was about the same level. It was a 3-star book, and there were just some littler, more problems, like the Nicholas from the original book was a completely different person, which I get. She created a different story around it, but it just felt a little, I don't know. It felt a little pushed and a little hard, and at that point she could have done the love triangle, actually, because in the first book I said I didn't believe it. You don't believe it for a second, the love triangle, but she could have easily pushed the love triangle to actually be believable, and like, who do you actually choose? But it did never get to that point. She didn't push it enough between Pasha and Vika. So the story starts out is Pasha is now the Tsar of Russia, and then Vika is his enchanter, and then Nicholas is a shadow, and he comes back stronger, and he doesn't know why, and he gets out of the shadow world, and it's because of his mother's magic, and it's kind of making him evil, and that's why he ends up a different person. Through the whole book, he's a different person, and he's trying to take the throne from his brother, because it's loudly announced now that he is his brother, and that he is trying to take the throne from him, and that's what the whole premise of the book is. And I was surprised that the whole book wrapped up. I thought there was going to be like a third book. But I was surprised in the end. The whole book did wrap up. And it was decently good. Didn't hate it. Didn't love it. It was just middle of the road. But the next one was Slayer by Kiersten White. So there was some problems with this book. I did read Kiersten White's other trilogy that got really big. The Now I Rise gender flip of Vlad the Impaler. Absolutely love those books. Never read anything about Vlad the Impaler, so I was kind of high ranking this book already when I went into it. Number 1, I only watched random Buffy episodes, and I was quite young when Buffy came out, and I never went back and rewatched them. So when they started talking about Watchers at the beginning of this book, and about Buffy, and about all the information at the very beginning of this book, what happened between the end of Buffy's last season, I guess last episode, and this book, I kind of had no idea what was going on, and I didn't even know what a Watcher was. I had no memory of that. I just knew Buffy was a Slayer. I didn't even know who Angel was. That's how vaguely I remember the Buffy series, and I was not a big fan or anything. I just had too much going on in my life, I guess, at that time. So I didn't know a lot about the book. So that was my first con. I did give this book a really high rating, and I know people who are Buffy fans gave it a lower rating. So I don't know what that says, but I think I gave this book a 4-star because it still was really written well, really entertaining. We had a good ending, so I want to read the next part of the series, and I really liked it. It follows Nina, who is a Watcher, and everything's like died down, and all the portals are closed, and in comes a demon. And this book focuses a lot more, I would say, on demons. And are they actually truly bad? Are some of them kind of good or worth saving? It doesn't focus too much on vampires. So I'm guessing the next one might focus a little bit more on vampires. We will see. I truly did enjoy it. I know some people did not who are Buffy players, but I did. My only caution is if you don't know the Buffy background, it's a little hard. But if you go back and watch the first episode like I did after I read the book, I was like, oh, all this makes a lot more sense now. So there's that as well. There is a little bit of love in it, but it's not the main point of the story. So I always like when a little bit of love is thrown in. I'm a big romance fan. Anyway, so next book is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo, and I also gave this one 4 stars. I really loved it. Didn't love it as much as Cricket Kingdom. but loved it way more than the original Grisha trilogy. So the original Grisha trilogy was like younger, wasn't written as well, was written in furs, so I didn't like it as much. And I think Leigh Bardugo got way more into her writing style on Cricket Kingdom and now on King of Stars, or Six of Crows and King of Stars. But my number one complaint about this book is if you did not read both of those series, so I'm so glad I went back and read the first series, the Grisha series, you would have not known what was going on, really. I don't know. Or the characters wouldn't have meant as much to you. So you do follow Nicholas, and you also follow Zoya, which I was a big surprise, and because I didn't really like her in the other series, and then I really liked her in this series. She was a really fun character. She was actually the most main vivid character to me besides Nina. Absolutely love Nina and Mathis' story. I'm so glad she brought Mathis back in a way, like just a little bit in the background, because I really wanted to know, because Mathis was one of my favorite books from this series. Like, Mathis was one of my favorite people. So that was my only other complaint, is that the Nina story is almost a completely separate story to me than what was going on with Nicholas and Zoya. And Nicholas is trying to run his empire. There's a monster chasing him, and I love that. Well, he transformed into a monster, so I love the whole monster storyline. I like the storyline. I love the ending. Big cliffhanger, no surprise. And so I loved everything. It was really good writing style again. And I love the characters even more this time. My only other complaint was that I didn't feel like, compared to all her other books, I didn't know where we were going with this book. Had no idea. All I know is that Nicholas had needed to get married. But the other books, she always set out. There was always a goal to accomplish. And this book, I didn't know where I was going, so I wasn't super invested, and I fell asleep a lot reading it. I was just so comfortable, and the story was good, and I kept falling asleep. It was not the bad writing. It was not a bad plot. It just, I guess I wasn't like story-driven or plot-driven to me. But I do love the characters. I'm so excited to read the next one. And I still did give it 4 stars. So solid read. Next one was The Huntress by Kate Quinn, which I gave 5 stars, which is a big surprise because I don't think last year I gave the Alice at number 5 stars. It was really done well, and it was a solid read. I just didn't rather enjoy it as much. I absolutely loved The Huntress. So this tells a story about World War II. So this is a new release this year. So it's World War II, and there was a woman who killed people in World War II quite horrifically and killed children. And this is set afterwards. And these are the people hunting down people, or Nazis, or people who did horrific things during World War II. And so they're the ones hunting them down. And they gave this specific woman the name The Huntress. So it's all set, and it starts off with this Bostonian girl who's like 17 and just knows something is really off with her stepmother, and has the inkling from the very beginning. But it does time span a lot. There's another really interesting key player to this, and she is a girl that got almost killed by her, but managed to escape, and she was a bomber fighter pilot out of Russia. So her story is incredibly interesting and unique, and I've never read anything about bomber fighter pilots. They do talk about the Night Witches, which I think I read about in history, but I never read anything or heard about the bomber fighter pilots that came out of Russia that were women. So her story is really unique. The Huntress story is really unique, and the daughter, of course, ties in, and then there's also 2 men, of course, and they're the original. One of them is like a famous journalist, and he has turned his life in, like, he thought journalism was like what was giving him life, and doing combat journalism was that. But then after the war, he felt kind of lost and became a hunter, and then his translator as well. And both guys are pretty interesting, but the girls, I think, really went out in this story. The girls have far more character development and far more interesting stories and pathways. I think she writes authentic feelings in the book and everything, and it's really good. You don't really know what's going to happen, and I thought she did a really, really good job, and it's suspenseful, and it's good, and you'll read it like that. So I would definitely check it out if you like historical fiction romance, or if you like suspense. Okay, the next one was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book took me forever to get around to. because I had heard about it and heard about it and heard about Evelyn Hugo, and so I decided to go back and read like all of her other books first, except for like one, which I have read now. But I read Daisy Jones and the Six finally because it was a new release this year, and that was not my favorite. Her other contemporary chick lit books I absolutely adore. Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, both of them, I had a struggle with connecting with the main characters. They were just so out of line with who I am and my feelings and stuff that I had trouble wanting to read their story and connecting with them. So Daisy Jones is a girl who is a drug addict, and she wants to become a singer, and she's beautiful, and things come naturally to her, and she kind of stumbles in this in a way where other people are really striving for it, I believe, in the background. And then the Six is driven by a man named Billy, and he is like into himself a lot. And he has had a lot of success already before Daisy Jones came along, and his band has had a lot of success with him, and he writes the songs, produces the song, but he is an absolute control freak. He is an alcoholic in the story, in the beginning of the story, and then it smooths over with his wife Camilla. His wife is really kind of a pillar for him. She has kids with him. So the big hitch in this is that he pairs up with Daisy Jones, and they make this beautiful magical music that everybody loves and everybody remembers from the 70s, and it's all interview based. So the story was solid reread. All the characters were interesting. All of the characters were different. I did love that. I did love the interview based. I thought it was very, very fit for the book, and I liked going back in time. But some of the side characters were rather boring, rather one-sided, rather I didn't care to read about them. Daisy Jones and Camilla, the main heroine love interest of Billy, did not stand on their own as women outside of Billy. It was like Billy was propping them up, which I didn't particularly like. And I know they had a lot of issues at the time, because she had kids and she was dealing with Rock's her husband, and then Daisy was a drug addict and trying to make it somewhere in life. And she had a lot of problems, but I just felt like they could have stood a little more as individual women. I didn't like that they were propped up by Billy, and Billy's kind of a boring person, okay? His personality is meh, and his characterization is very good. Like, it is through the whole book, she is very strict his characterization, but his personality is kind of boring, and I didn't care about him. And in the end, I cared way more about the two women, and everybody else kind of fell to the wayside, and I didn't even really remember Billy's name. So that's where I landed with the book. It was a solid read. She's a very good writer. If you're into that kind of stuff, rock stars, or Evelyn Hugo was more like a Marilyn Monroe story a little bit. It's just, in the end, I just had a failure to connect with the characters, and they just weren't stories for me in the end. But I give them a 3-star because she's a phenomenal writer, and they were easy to read, and I could see why people love them so much. The next one I read was After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this one I have whole different feelings about. I connected with these characters. I understand because I've been married for a decade, and there is a lot of heartbreak in this story. And I thought she was really authentic to where you can take problems in marriages and let them snowball and suppress them to where they become something really, really big, even though they are something essentially really small. And I was so sad in this story for parts of it. Parts of it did make me cry. It made me feel all the emotions. After I Do is a setting about these people who are struggling and just kind of hate each other in life at this point. And they were so in love at one point, and they don't know how to get back there. So they decide to take a year off. And then the female learns how to stand on her own, and that she's comfortable being by herself. But at the same time, does that mean she needs to be by herself, or can she be happier with him? Or so that's like the questionings. I do love all the questions and all the things that she came up with in this book, but I do also like the message. I think in the end, I think the ultimate message was that love changes everything. So who you choose to be in love with and who you choose to spend your life with, it will change your life direction, and it'll always change everything in your life. So you can stand on your own, or you can do it with somebody and be in love with them, but it will always change your life. You will not be on the same directional path. So I liked that message about it. I absolutely love this one. I think I gave this one 4 stars, but it is pretty close to a 5-star book. But I really love her writing. So like I said, I love her contemporary writing. Love this one. I would recommend this one, definitely. The next book I read was The Kennedy Debutante. This was a 3-star book, and it is by Kerri Maher. This book spans the time of 1938 to 1944, and it is a story about Kit Kennedy. So, never heard anything about Kit Kennedy before. She had a rather short life compared to some people in her family. The Kennedy story is quite tragic, right? They died all the time. So this was it's not a nonfiction piece because it was really well researched, and she had to pull from the letters, but there wasn't that much known about like Kit's true feelings. But I really like the story. It's set in 1938 when when her dad wanted to be president, when Joe wanted to be president, and he was an ambassador to England at the time, and we know everything hit the fan because World War II was coming on, and there was kind of no stopping World War II. And he was the opposite of that. He was supposed to be the diplomat and stop the war from ever happening. So he gets replaced, a little bit shamed, but you kind of have to reflect back on history, like who was going to do well in that position at the time in England, when Hitler was lying about everything. So yeah, that's where the story starts out. She is there for her debutante season. She meets a young duke. It is not what her parents want. Her parents want somebody who is wealthy and who is Catholic. As you know, the Kennedys had 9 children, and at the time Joe wanted to be president, and then once his kind of failed attempt more at being a diplomat, he put those focus on his next son, Joe. And then Joe also went to war. Joe is a lot featured in this book because he was in London a lot with Kik during the war, because Kik goes back to London because she is so enamored with this man. She lies to the Red Cross a little bit, and gets herself there against her parents' wishes, against everybody's wishes. I mean, she put herself in a war zone. So she works at the Red Cross, gets in touch with the Duke, and their love story is sweet and honorable. And I think it was very authentic to maybe what it was. And it's very sad. It's got a sad ending. If you know about Kit Kennedy, she didn't live to be only a few years after the war. You know, her brother Joe dies during the war, and it's not a happy ending for this romance. But I do like the time span. I was pretty surprised by that. I thought from the synapse it was just like over the summer, her debutante season, and what happened and how she ended up meeting the man who would eventually become Duke, or after his father. But she was the Marchess for about a month of Devonshire, I believe it is. But I thought the book was done really well, but it wasn't my favorite Kennedy book, of course. Jack is featured a lot in the book, and his own struggles with his own relationships and his parents not agreeing with who he is choosing as well. And the younger brothers and sisters are mentioned a lot, and her older sister as well, which makes me so sad as well. So, and of course, Joe and Rose, her parents. But, so you get the whole Kennedy family all alive and well at one point, and then some very, very sad things happen repetitively at the end of this book. But I really liked it in the end, and I think I like it more. It is close to a 4-star for me. I think I like it more the more I think about it and the more I read on it. I always love the Kennedy stories. I don't know why, but really good. I'd recommend them. The next book is The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon, and I gave this 5 stars. This one I really liked. The first Nicola Yoon book, Everything, I think it was Everything. Sorry if I'm wrong about that. I'll cut this out if I am. I did like it. I didn't like it. It was just an okay YA romance, contemporary romance, contemporary YA, whatever you want to call it. I didn't really like her first one. So, I love it when authors shock me. And I absolutely love this story. It is very fast-paced. It happens in 24 hours. There are major problems in this book going on. There is an illegal immigrant. The first girl is an illegal immigrant from Jamaica, and then the boy is a first-generational immigrant. So they kind of have some of the same understanding. The boy is overly romantic and kind of free with the wind at the time, And she is very practical and not. But I love the story. It's very cute. I can't wait for the movie. And I get it now. Like, I wasn't going to read it because I didn't like the first book she wrote. And then after that, I was like, I kept hearing about this. And then I heard about it a ton lately. And I think it's because the movie's coming out. And I was like, you know what? I'll put my hands up. I'm going to read it. And I'm so glad I did. It was definitely a 5-star review for me, which is pretty hard to get for a contemporary YA romance. It's pretty hard to get for me. So I absolutely loved it. I thought it was cute, adorable, maybe a little unpractical, but whatever. It's really cute and adorable. And so the next one was The Nightingale by Krista Hanna. Gave this one 5 stars. I absolutely loved The Great Alone by Krista Hanna. So I was like, everybody loved this book and their dog last year, even though it came out a few years ago now. I've got to read it. It's World War II. I love historical fiction. I got to read it. So this story tells the story of 2 women. Once again, there is a sister, Vivian, and her husband's name is Antoine, and then Isabel, and you meet early on a guy named Gaton. I think that's how you say his name. The 2 women are set in France. Very different lives. Their mother has died young. Their dad has ignored them. They were put in boarding schools, and they kind of get thrown together and kind of don't like each other, but then they ended up depending on each other a lot. The Isabel story's a little bit sadder. She's a far more adventurous sister. And Vivian's story is a completely different story. She stays at home for most of World War II. Her husband is gone. He's in the prison. He's a prisoner through the whole book, and these Nazis billet her home, and it's kind of scary. And Isabel's there for part of the billeting, but then Isabel becomes this great adventurer more, and she gets into the resistance, and she ends up backpacking over the mountains into Spain a lot to get a lot of RAF pilots out. So the story is a huge adventure, super sad, make your ball. But really well done. As far as, like, I think maybe, I don't know why, but The Great Alone is still my favorite. People are like, no, because they've read, like, a lot of her books, and they're like, no, it's definitely The Nightingale. But right now, even when this is freshly read, I still think The Great Alone is my favorite from her. Absolutely loved it, though. Highly recommend it for a historical fiction piece. And 2 really strong female characters. Absolutely loved them. Next one was More Than Words by Jill Santopolo. So I read... And this I gave 3 stars. So I read The Light We Cannot See, or The Light, I don't know, got huge reviews by Jill Santopolo, and I gave it really high rating. There were some problems in the story. It made me angry. It made me mad. But More Than Words, once again, she came back and she had really authentic feelings that I have not heard expressed in other romantic relationships. This is about Nina. She is a speechwriter, and she is wealthy. But for me, growing up in a very glamorous lifestyle, and her parents own these hotel chains in New York, and she is the wealthiest of wealthiest. And she's got this man named Tim, who she has grown up with her entire life and has known him her entire life, and they've just recently became romantically involved. There's a little bit of a spicy story about her parents. Her dad does die quite early on in the book, and what happened to her mother and what happened to her mother's death, and kind of a revealing story there. And then there's a whole nother man who is running to be mayor, and she is a speechwriter for him. But she made a deal with her dad. Once her dad dies, or once she gets to a point, she will have to take over the family hotel business. So, and then her dad's best friend works at a hotel. So Tim, her serious boyfriend, is also going to be heading up and taking over this hotel chain. The only thing is I didn't think Nina really acted like an heiress. And I know she wasn't supposed to because that wasn't in the character's demeanor, but she didn't seem like an heiress to me. And then Raphael, the man who is running for mayor, has a bit of an intriguing story. It's a big romance between Raphael, Tim, and Nina, the main girl. That's the big thing. It's a love triangle. She's really good at writing like authentic love pieces and authentic feelings and being emotionally torn. But this one, I don't know if I didn't buy it all the way. So that's why I got a lower score of 3 stars. I didn't buy it all the way. I thought she did a really good job. I would definitely read anything by her. She's really good at getting those authentic feelings and writing really smoothly and writing a nice story. I didn't connect with this one as much. And I didn't believe it as much. I didn't believe the Eris's character. And Tim's was kind of boring. So, yeah, there was that one. And then the last one was The Proposal by Jasmine Guillory. So, The Wedding Day got huge reviews last year, and I read it, and I didn't really like it. I read The Proposal, and it was okay. Both of them were just okay. Both of them were the same kind of story. For this longer writing, to me, it seems for me to get a bit longer through her books compared to like a Rachel Gibson books. These ones fly by. I don't know if these ones are worth my time. So, best-selling author, The Wedding Day. This stars this woman. She gets proposed to at a Dodger Stadium. Her name is Nick through the whole book. And then this man is Carlos. And Carlos is the one that saves her from that engagement because there are like people trying to film her and embarrass her. And he is a doctor. Carlos is in The Wedding Day. So it's a spin-off a little bit of The Wedding Day because he is a doctor and he is friends with the other doctor who was in The Wedding Day. So the story is humorous. It's funny. It's chick lit. It's easy to read. And there's nothing hard about it. It's just, I didn't like it. It wasn't my favorite romance. The girl is a writer and yeah, and he's a doctor in the story, but it was okay in the end. It's a passable read. If you really like The Wedding Day, I think you will absolutely love this book. For me, it was just middle of the road. And that is all the books I read in April. There was so many. Sorry if I went through them so quickly. I was just trying to go through them. There will be separate reviews if there aren't reviews out already on all these books. But there were some absolutely fantastic reads. I would highly recommend. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.